All right. He says we're live, so we're going to go ahead and call to order the meeting of the Jeffersonville Common Council. It is July the 6th, 2020, and it's just after 7 p.m. We'll have a roll call, please.
Councilperson White?
Present.
Councilperson Burns?
Present.
Council Vice President Maples?
Here.
Councilperson Croft?
Here.
Councilperson Webb?
Present. Present.
Council President Owens?
Here.
Councilperson Hawkins?
Here.
Councilperson Ellis?
Here.
Let the record reflect that we have 8 councilpersons present and 1 absent.
Councilman Paris mentioned that he wasn't going to be able to make it on the call tonight. So we'll move right along. Minutes, we have minutes from the regular proceedings of June the 15th, 2020. Are there any comments or changes?
Make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Maples, and a second, Mr. Webb. I'm sorry.
Councilperson White?
Aye.
Councilperson Burns?
Aye.
Council Vice President Maples?
Aye.
Councilperson Croft?
Aye.
Councilperson Webb?
Aye.
Council President Owens?
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins?
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis?
Yes.
8-0.
Okay. Approval of the agenda.
There's no changes. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Maples, second. Was that Mr. Burns?
It's Hawkins.
We'll call it Burns. Mr. Hawkins? Okay.
Councilperson White?
Aye.
Councilperson Burns?
There was some feedback from Ms. Gill, but I heard him say aye.
Okay, thank you. Council Vice President Maples?
Aye.
Councilperson Croft?
Aye.
Councilperson Webb?
Aye.
Council President Owens?
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins?
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis?
Aye.
0.
All right. We have claims to be approved. The civil city claims in the amount of $3,609,107.55. Ms. Metcalf, were there any changes or
No, I have no changes.
anything? Questions, comments? Or a motion?
I'll make a motion, we accept.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Croft, second, Mr. Maples. Ms. Gill?
Councilperson White?
Aye.
Councilperson Burns? I'm not hearing him. Are you all hearing me?
Mr. Burns, are you still with us? We must have lost him.
Okay. Council Vice President Maples?
Aye.
He's on mute. Councilperson Croft?
Aye.
Councilperson Webb?
Aye.
Council President Owens?
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins?
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis?
Aye.
I'm going to circle back. Is Councilperson Burns?
He's trying to connect to the audio. Give him just a second.
Okay.
Bill, would you like to Vote on the claims?
Yeah, I approve the claims.
Okay.
8-0.
0. Then we have claims from the parks in the amount of $36,055.03.
I have no changes.
There's no comment. I make a motion to approve.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Maples. Second, Mr. Hawkins.
Councilperson White,
Aye.
Councilperson Burns,
Aye.
Council Vice President Maples,
Aye.
Councilperson Croft,
Aye.
Councilperson Webb,
Aye.
Council President Owen,
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins,
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis.
Aye.
8-0.
All right.
Thank you.
Report of the clerk. No report. We'll go into unfinished business. We have Heather Metcalf, 2020 OR 29. This is an ordinance transferring certain funds within the same department that passed on the 1st and 2nd in the June 15th meeting.
There's been no changes.
Motion to approve.
Second.
The motion by Mr. Maples and a second by Mr. Croft to approve 2020 OR 29. Ms. Gill?
Councilperson White,
Aye.
Councilperson Burns,
Aye.
Council Vice President Maples,
Aye.
Councilperson Croft,
Aye.
Councilperson Webb,
Aye.
Council President Owen,
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins,
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis,
Aye.
8-0.
Thank you.
All right, new business. Chad Reichel. Brief introductory on the full zoning code update that the planning staff will undertake over the next year. Chad's down in the council chambers.
You skipped, it's actually Paul.
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. I did skip over, didn't I? Excuse me, Chad. Number 10 was Paul Northam for an update on the WAC turf field. I'm sorry, Paul.
Thank you. No, that's okay. I've got a couple things to talk about. We'll talk about the WAC turf field first. The turf field's been in place for about 7 years now, and the normal lifetime on a turf field is 8 to 10 years, but we've had some extraordinary life on that field. We're renting it out every week and every weekend. As a matter of fact, this past weekend, we had a huge soccer tournament out there. Last weekend, we had a lacrosse tournament out there. So it's getting some extra use. So that being said, we're starting to get some spots on the turf, some repair marks, some divots that have been repaired. It's all safe. We've had people look at it. The Moats group who put the field in looked at it. It's all safe, but it's starting to show its age. And we need to start thinking about how we can fund that or how we can purchase a new one. We're speaking with the Moats group about getting prices on a new field. They ballparked about $300 to $450, but they're trying to get us an accurate price on that. We think it's going to be somewhere in that range. So we can definitely get through this year. We may be able to limp through next year, but soon we're going to need to do something. So we've talked to the CCSA, the soccer association that uses that field, and they have committed to contributing some money. They haven't said exactly how much yet. We're hoping it's a 50-50 split, but we want to wait and come up with that dollar amount for the new turf field before we approach them again on assigning a dollar amount to it. But they have committed to helping out with some money. I've also talked with Heather about a couple different options to raise some money. One being possibly a non-reverting fund where we can take the receipts from all rentals of the field, plop it into a fund, and after 8 to 10 years, we could have $300,000 or $400,000 in there. We did the math on it, and I think after 10 years, we could easily have $400,000 in that. And that's not taking into consideration what CCSA would help contributing to that new field. So I don't have anything for you to vote on tonight. Just wanted to kind of give an update where we were. As soon as we get that new price on the Moats field, we'll bring that to CCSA, hopefully get a commitment out of them, and then come back to you to start talking about how we can get the money for that field. I'll move to the next thing unless anybody has any questions on that.
I have a question,
Sure.
or actually a request. Can you get us a copy of the agreement we have with the CCSA?
Yeah, sure can.
Okay, that's
I'll
all.
have that emailed out to all the council members tomorrow.
Thank you.
Sure. Okay, number 2 is on the river stage. Sure, go ahead.
Yeah, Paul Donnycroft.
Yes.
Earlier in the year before COVID-19 hit, some executives that I know with Hanson Aggregates, the old TJ Atkins quarry, met with Bill Burns, myself, and the mayor, and they want to get more involved in the city and donating money to help parks and different things. So I just want to throw that out there. That's still a possibility that they would help us with what you're talking about.
That's great to know. We've actually been speaking with our city partner manager, Dave Simpson, about trying to get someone to put their naming rights on the turf field and the building. We can look at a couple different options of getting donations to help pay for a new field. That was one of them, a donor who would put some money into it, and we named the field after him. We would never change the name of the park. Worley Athletic Complex would stay on there, but it might be so-and-so field at Worley Park. So we're looking into that, but thank you for that heads up. Okay, secondly is the river stage. And if you remember a few months ago, we hired a company to come put foam in the river stage, and it was a fantastic job. We took it down river, no problems, no leaks. It's done a great job. And I don't know how long we're gonna get out of that. He said we could expect to get as many as 10 or 20 years. You just don't know. But they did a great job, and it's working great. Now back to the cost of the foam in there. We originally had a donor who was pledging to give us $170,000 for the foam replacement or the foam installation, and their grant was canceled, and so we're no longer getting that money. So Heather and I met the other day to talk about where we could find that money. I have money in my budget. If you remember, you also gave me $100,000 to buy new vehicles. So I could use some of that money in addition to my equipment money, in addition to some extra vehicle money. I could make it work if I had to, but it's going to pretty much take all my money for this year. And I wouldn't buy any new vehicles like you had given me the money to do. So I'm asking to see if you would consider taking money from rainy day fund, surplus, somewhere else, rather than in my budget. $170,000 is a pretty big hit to my budget. So I want to put that out there and let you discuss it or answer any questions on that. Okay, I'll move on to number 3. If you guys want to discuss that, I can come back in the next meeting, or however you want to handle it, or I can meet with a few of you, whatever you want to do on that. But I'm looking for a help out with that $170,000 bill for the phone. So I'll move on to the next one if you're ready. Okay, the last one is a transfer that we normally do every year. It's from council. It comes from gaming money. It's $100,000 from gaming to go into River Stage. Now I realize River Stage is not happening this year. We're not paying bands this year because there are no concerts to put on down there, but there's still things that need to be done. We've already spent about $30,000 on painting and repair work that we had planned on having in our budget if the River Stage season was a go. So we went ahead and had that work done. We paid $30,000. We also have bills due for the staging of the River Stage. It'll have to stay up in Utica at its normal winter location the whole year because we won't be bringing it down now. And so there's a monthly fee to stage that up there. And then the last one is we would like to upgrade sound and lighting. The sound and lighting on that was last replaced back in 2012 when Mayor Moore took over. We put some money into getting new sound and lighting, and it's lasted, this is, I guess, going on its 9th year, 8 full years, and it's starting to show its age. Plus, we need some upgrades to the sound and lighting. And so I'd like to take some of that money from the $100,000 to use to upgrade our sound and lighting system. So I think that's going to require, Heather, check me if I'm wrong here and help me out here. Does that require a vote from the council, or just do I send an email over to them? How's that work?
It's already budgeted in the gaming money under the council, and the council would just need to have a claim put through by the clerk's office for that dollar amount. But we
Okay.
just wanted to make sure that you all were comfortable with the 100,000 based off of what Paul's talking about here.
And I'll
I
answer any
personally
questions if
am
you have
not.
it. Okay, I'm sorry, Scotty.
I said, I'm not personally in favor of transferring the 100,000 at this moment with the
Okay.
COVID-19. And after we talked to every department head about trying to save money, I understand that those are needs.
Sure.
But at this point, I'm not comfortable with allowing that money to be submitted through a claim. I understand that it may be beneficial to do it while we're not using the river stage, but maybe not the full 100,000. What's the monthly fee for the storage of the boat that you wasn't anticipating on having? Do you
I
know
think
what
it's
that
around,
is?
yeah, it's around 2,500. And so we're going to be an extra 6 months that we hadn't planned on. So what is that, 15,000?
Okay. And I'm just one vote, so I don't
Paul,
know if
why-
anybody else has any
Why do we
comments.
have- Yeah, Paul, why do we have to why do we have to keep the river stage in storage? Why can't we move it to the Riverside Drive, just not have the events?
We could do that at no problem to put it down there. It gets weathered a lot harder down there because you've got the river and the tide or whatever, and the sun on it. Right now, it's protected in a cove where there's no waves and no damage from the river. But you know, we could take it down there if we needed to.
Paul, have you had any discussions, or can we have a discussion on what it would look like if we hired a company that used their equipment for the river stage, and so they own the equipment and we just pay them to do basically paying them to do the sound and organize the sound for all of our concerts and events?
Yeah, I think we did. I'll have to check back, but I think 3 or 4 years ago, we did look for a company and we had trouble finding somebody, but that was 3 or 4 years ago. So we certainly could try that again. And just, I wish I had Sarah on here because she could help me answer these questions better than I can. But there is an issue with using someone else's equipment, but I'll talk to her about it and come back at the next meeting and talk about it. But that certainly is an option.
I know that it may weather better up there in Utica, but I do, even though we're not having the events, and it does save us some cost.
I'm sorry, Bill, you were kind of breaking up there. What was part of that?
I kind of agree with Matt. Bringing the barge back, the stage back down to the riverfront, it makes it look a lot nicer, even though we're not using it, because it looks like something's missing there right now.
How much, Paul, how much does it cost to transport it down and back?
I'm trying to think off the top of my head. I think it's close to the amount to store it per month. It's about $3,000, I think, for them to bring it
Okay.
down.
And then when do you usually take it back?
Usually goes back in November, sometimes October. We do run the risk of having to move it down if the river goes back up again. We had a lot of adjustment in the river this year. We had
that was another concern. That was another concern we had, is that we move it down just for show, and then the river takes a turn and we got to move it back, and you're looking at another $3,000 a pop. But,
yeah.
I would personally support leaving it in storage, just to keep the wear and tear off of it. I see Steve Webb just unmuted, and he's more familiar with this area than probably anybody else in the meeting. So I don't know if Steve's got any opinion on that.
I know we try to save a little bit to move it down there, but I think it's best to probably leave it in storage because with that river, you know, it's been unusual here in the last 3 or 4 years, and we could get issues with driftwood and then cost us more money to pay somebody to move all that driftwood. I mean, I know we're saving a few $1,000s, but for what we spend on that, that's a few pennies compared to what we've got invested in it now. So,
And with it not being used, it's going to be
Yeah.
subject to, I mean, potential vandalism, and we got to make sure it's secure because it's going to be unattended for 3 or 4 months. So
liability there too, Les.
Yeah.
Right?
So yeah, you got a liability issue just leaving it down there.
Yeah, and Paul, maybe if there's any maintenance to be done on some of the framing and stuff like that and painting, maybe it's time to do it now, you know, but I think we just.
Yeah, Steve, I appreciate that. The good thing is we did the painting and the repair work to the backside. There was a lot of rotted wood. We replaced that this past year. The only thing left to do repair wise is the railing where the gates are. There's 4 gates on it, and each of the gates have been buckled a little bit. And I've asked the company up there to give us a price on repairing those rails. But after that, other than cleaning the inside of it out, it's in pretty good shape.
Good.
So
I would vote to leave it where it's at. I think it's best to storage, liability wise. Slip and fall, drowning, look bad on the city.
Yeah. Yeah, we do have people that wander on there during the season during the middle of the week. We used to have security pros had a camera on the system, and it would alert me anytime somebody went on the barge there. And a couple summers ago, when that was active, we got several notifications of people wandering on there. So I agree with the liability issues. So Matt, let me say this: should we go for asking for a partial transfer instead of the full 100,000, or where do you think I should go with this? I understand what Mr. Maple said about the money, and I agree. Before this whole COVID thing, or right during this whole COVID thing, when it started, I had planned on not spending a lot of my money and saving 150 to 200,000 in my budget. Now, if I have to spend this money on the river stage, there goes that. But that being said, I agree with saving money, and I'm trying to do the best I can, cutting corners and saving money. But the truth of it is we've already spent 30,000 that we didn't have. Heather, again, please check me if I'm wrong here, but if we don't transfer that 100, we're going to have to transfer it from somewhere else within my budget to cover that 30,000 that we've already spent. Is that right?
Not necessarily. You've also collected about $41,000 in city partner donations that I have all decided that they were either going to be reimbursed back their money because we're not having a river stage this year, or we'll need to hold on to that cash and have it carry over to next year. And their donations will not come in next year because they've made it for this year. So that's $41,000 that we need to think about of it, either having it in as cash or having it available to refund back to the city partners, because that money's already been spent. So right now the cash is pretty much gone out of the river stage fund. So your 100,000 normally is 149,000, but it was lowered for this year because you changed the budget a little bit and added a few other things. So this amount was lowered, thinking that we were going to have more city partner donations. And that transfer is usually made in the beginning of the year. It just wasn't thought of prior to COVID. I think that kind of hit us in a hard spot. So we do need to keep in mind at least 41,000 needs to go into that fund at some point. Does that make any sense?
I think we probably need to schedule a time for at least a couple of council members to sit down with you, Paul, and maybe Heather, and maybe even Les if he wants to join in, and kind of talk our way through this whole transition of what the Parks Department has become financially and physically for the city, because we should see a lot of savings in all of the bands that we're not paying this summer. The aquatic center is closed, so there's no expense. Well, there's not as much expense with operating that facility. Obviously, it still has to be maintained, but there should be a lot of opportunities for savings within the Parks Department because of the unfortunate circumstances that we're in. But then also, I think that maybe the council can find an opportunity to step in and help out with that river stage repair fund, because that losing that grant funding was not something we foresaw or could control, and we may be able to find a way to mitigate that a little bit. The state nor the feds have come through with any type of lost revenue aid for municipalities or local government. We can probably find something to pull together for that lost revenue if some members are willing to get together outside of a council meeting and look over the numbers.
Sure, no problem. I'd be happy to do that.
Heather, one more thing about that is any of our donors went ahead and said you can have our donation this year just out of good nature and plan on donating next year? Because if so, I think they need some kind of recognition.
I agree. I know that some of them have decided to move it to different things like the holiday parade, if that happens, or some other things. So they've kind of shifted their donations from one thing to another.
Right. So we have 3 events still planned for the rest of the year. It's the Steamboat Nights Festival, the Halloween, the trick or treat in downtown, and the Halloween holiday parade, which happens right after Thanksgiving. But talking to some people about the way things are turning, that may not happen. We may have to cancel, because if the schools do what they're saying they could possibly do, and they close down after Thanksgiving, would it be right for us to have a holiday parade the weekend after the schools shut down and aren't opening back up until January? Is it the right thing to do? I don't know. We're still planning on it, but there is a thought that maybe that won't happen. So those donors, like Heather mentioned, they have rolled their money into other events. But let's say we don't have those 3 events. There's nothing to roll into in 2020. But some of them have kindly agreed to roll it over to 2021, which is a good thing. We don't have to give refunds, but it's a bad thing because we probably won't get donations from them next year. They're just going to say, well, my money from 2020 went to 2021, so we're going to lose out on some of those donations. Not all of them. I'm sure, like you mentioned, Mr. Maples, some of them out of the kindness of their heart are going to say, it was a bad year, we're going to go ahead and let you take 2020, and then we'll give you more in 2021. But Dave's working through all that right now, and most of the sponsors have said we're rolling it over to 2021, so in a way it's helped.
Okay.
Okay, that's all I had, guys.
Right.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Now, Mr. Reichel, we'll move on. Chad, if you'd like to give us some words of wisdom on the zoning changes that you're looking for over the next year.
Sounds good. I'm going to share my screen here. You all see that? Great. So over the last few years, the planning department has been talking up the need for an update to the zoning code. The code was last fully updated in 2001. And as I think all of you know, a lot has changed in Jeffersonville in the last 20 years. Earlier this year, the mayor indicated in his State of the City address that updating the zoning code would be one of his next priorities. 2 years ago, Nathan and I put out a request for qualifications to find out what the cost of hiring a contractor to create the code update that we need. And those costs were anywhere between $100,000 and $200,000. Earlier in the year, the mayor and I discussed the possibilities of where these funds for this project would come from and how we get there. And then the coronavirus hit. So during my weeks of working remotely, I did a bunch of brainstorming with myself, with my staff, and really came to the conclusion that, while it's a fairly difficult and time-consuming task, I really believe that the planning staff can save the city the expense and do the project in-house. My compatriots over in Clarksville recently did theirs in-house. And another colleague of mine in Greenwood, Indiana, has recently done one in-house. They've assured me that it is a lot of work, but it is very doable. So also just looking, into the future, while the pace of development hasn't slowed a whole lot quite yet, my sense is that, depending on where the virus goes, things could slow down a little bit in the development world. So working on a big project like this, I think is feasible and a great way to keep my staff motivated and working, even if we have a development slowdown in the future. So tonight, I just wanted to go over a little bit, give you my plan for the update, the overhaul of the zoning code. Our plan is to develop what we're going to call a uniform development ordinance. And what exactly is a uniform development ordinance? Well, basically, the city has a zoning code, which was adopted in 2001 and has had numerous revisions in the last 20 years. This zoning code is primarily for the development of individual parcels. We also have what's called a subdivision control ordinance, and this document was last adopted in 1996. So it's even older than the zoning code, and it's had 2 minor revisions over the years, but by and large, it is the same subdivision control today that it was in 1996. Our plan is to merge those 2 documents, bring those 2 documents together in one ordinance that controls all development within the city. This project, certainly the need for this project, like I said, 20 years of change. We've seen tremendous physical growth and development in the city. The city looks nothing like it did 20 years ago. If you look in the corner of the screen, there's a picture of the Veterans Parkway area from 20 years ago. There is nothing there, and now it's a thriving commercial center. So we have had significant changes not only in physical growth but also in economic development trends. Our population continues to change, and while the population is changing, the needs of the population change as well. We have seen numerous amendments to the document over the years. Many of those have been put into the document and have been, really beneficial. Some of them haven't been quite as beneficial over the years, and a few of them have sort of missed getting put into the document until very recently. So really going through the whole document, there is this, it's a little bit cluttered, it's a little messy, and it needs to be pulled together and brought into a good, clean form again. The other primary reason that we need this project is that we have an extremely large number of waivers, variances, fees and lieu, planned developments that we are approving through Plan Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. In 2019, we only about 18 to 20% of the development plans that came through our department could be approved at a staff level. The rest of those, the 80% of those, had to go to the Plan Commission and the Board of Zoning Appeals. It takes me and my staff a lot more time every time we have to bring something to the Plan Commission or the BZA. It costs more money, it takes more time. If we can get to a place where we're approving more things in-house, that's going to save us time, energy, and some stress on my staff as well. So primary goals, we want to combine and update these codes without making a really radical change from the current document. When we're done with this, I want it to look and function mostly as it is today. I don't want the developers, I don't want the designers, the architects, I don't want our staff, everyone who's looking at this code. I want them to feel like it's the same code. It's not a learning curve where we have to go back and relearn where everything is and how it functions. I also want to make sure that if you live in an R1 zone district today, that you continue to live in an R1 zone district, that we're not making huge impacts to the residents of our community. We want to certainly work to reduce the number of requested waivers and variants and create the flexibility that's needed for redevelopment in parts of the city. Areas like 10th Street, areas like 8th and Middle, Allison Lane, you know, we've seen some deterioration over the years, and it's really hard to do the kind of redevelopment that we want to see when our codes are fairly inflexible. So creating some of that flexibility, generating that in the code will be very helpful to us. There are a lot of internal processes and procedures that we do on a daily basis that aren't really codified in the code. The code was written when people were doing things a certain way, and now 20 years later, we're doing things, you know, radically different. So codifying some of those internal processes will be really important to us too. And then finally, you know, once we have this adopted, I think that there's probably going to be some minor revisions to the zoning map, especially in the older parts of the city. There are areas in Claysburg, there are areas in downtown Jeffersonville that are still zoned for Walmarts and Walgreens and the big scale commercial developments that we don't really want to see downtown. So there will be some revisions that we'll have to work through as well. Just wanted to give you an update, sort of timeline. We've been doing a lot of review as staff. We've been looking at some other existing codes. We have been going through our standards, our subdivision control ordinance, all of this. So we've been in this review phase, and now we're getting into this place where we want to engage people in the process. So we're coming to you. We are going to be talking more to the Plan Commission, to the Board of Zoning Appeals. We'll get a website out. We're going to do a little bit of survey work. It's kind of difficult because the zoning code is a little, you know, it's not everybody understands all the intricacies of the zoning code, but we think that there's some ideas, some thoughts that we can bring out into a survey just to kind of get the public engaged a little bit. We'll be talking to some members of the development community, and I really want to talk to some members in the downtown Merchants Association and some of the downtown neighborhood associations to talk about some of these smaller scale issues that happen in the downtown. After we do this engagement, there's going to be a long time where we're just going to be sitting, you know, in our offices doing all the dirty work. We're going to put together this draft. You know, right now the zoning code is you know, a 200-page document. The subdivision ordinance is another 50 pages. So you can imagine it's a lot of word pressing and editing and kind of moving and shifting and tweaking things to get everything, you know, where we want it to. Once we have that draft, we plan to unveil sort of the draft document. This is sort of what I'm calling the meat phase, where we will bring it again to you, to the public. We'll probably have a series of some public open houses just to talk about what the new development code means to the members of the public. And then finally, we get into the last phase of the process, which is the adopting of the UDO. So we're going to adopt the UDO, and then following adoption, we would work on making some of those modifications to the plan as necessary. That's sort of the presentation I have for you today. Feel free to ask me any questions about what I've just presented. Thanks.
Any comments or questions for Chad?
I would just appreciate a heads up on anything before you start talking to the folks in my district.
No problem. We'll get you in on those meetings too, Justin, if you want.
Good deal.
Yeah, I think most of us would be anxious to be a part of those public meetings just to hear what everybody has to say. Anything else? If not, we'll move on. We've got a zoning change request for property in the 4,000 block of Williams Crossing Way. This is a R2 planned development, and it's changing. It's going to stay a planned development, but with some minor altercation or Amendments, yes. Chad? Did you
Chad.
lose him?
Okay, this is a
Froze.
petition to rezone property. JT Development has filed an application to rezone property for a residential development. It comes to you from the Planning Commission with a favorable recommendation. And I believe John Kraft is on the call here to speak on behalf of the applicant, JT Development. John?
Thank you, Mr. Merkley. As Mr. Merkley indicated, this is a change of zoning, but it's really what I would consider a minor change of zoning. This is a planned unit development district in an R2 district. In the Plan Commission meeting recently, the Plan Commission approved a preliminary plat of Cooper's Crossing. Cooper's Crossing is a new subdivision that will connect with Williams Crossing. And because Williams Crossing was a planned unit development district, it will alter Williams Crossing by adding 3 additional lots to make connectivity between Williams Crossing and Cooper's Crossing. So it's really, while it's a change of zoning because it is a planned unit development district, the need for it is solely as a result of modifying the original planned unit development district by adding or creating 3 new lots to allow for the connectivity between Cooper's Crossing and Williams Crossing. As Mr. Merkley indicated, it comes to you with a favorable recommendation. We're asking this evening that you pass the ordinance rezoning the property. Jason Copperwaite is the engineer on the project. He is likewise on the call this evening. So if there would be any logistical questions with regards to the addition or the creation of 3 new lots and the connectivity, he is on the call for purposes of answering those questions. But we would ask that you pass the ordinance rezoning this modification to the planned unit development district.
Matt, I had a question if nobody else does. I know this, the Cooper's Crossing there was some resistance to it from, I believe, the Creekstone Ridge subdivision during planning, which is in my district. If we rezone this, allowing it to be attached to Williamsburg Crossing, would that alleviate some of the complaints of the traffic that would be going through the Creekstone Ridge subdivision?
Mr. Maples, I don't believe it alleviates it, because the primary concern of those residents was they didn't want any connectivity at all. They didn't want the 2 to connect. The result of that tends to be that the connectivity is ultimately something that is desired by your planning ordinance, and trying to have developments connect. That was the reason that there would be a stub in one to connect to this. They didn't want any connection, and I think the planning staff and Mr. Reichel can address this, but I think the planning staff would like to see the connectivity between these developments, and that's the reason for the modification or the change in the planned unit development district and the need for the rezone.
Okay. From my understanding, that the connection to the Creekstone Ridge subdivision, that's not what we're voting on tonight. That's already been approved, correct? So actually, in my belief, that if we approve this tonight, that would attach it with the Williamsburg Crossing, it may alleviate some of their traffic concerns because there's another entrance into the subdivision. Would that be an accurate statement, that voting for this potentially could stop some traffic from going through Creekstone Ridge and going through Williamsburg Crossing?
That would be my belief, but Jason, if you want to comment on that as well, you may.
Yeah, I can address that. This particular connection is a cul-de-sac at the far back end of Williams Crossing Way that is not connected to the adjacent property. What this does is creates a connection point to Cooper's Crossing, which then allows a more direct route through Williams Crossing, out of Cooper's Crossing, and out to Jeff Charleston Pike. So okay. Yes, it would be an easier route for people to get out. There's another route through Williams Crossing that also provides connectivity, but this would be a more direct, faster route. So probably the way people would go.
I just wanted it to be clear in the meeting before we voted that I do believe that this approval of this would alleviate some of the concerns of the traffic in the Creekstone Ridge subdivision. A vote for this is not for a vote for that attaching to the Creekstone Red subdivision, just for some clarity, that that's already been approved beyond the council's control.
That's correct.
Okay, thanks. Matt, if there's no further, I'll make a motion to approve.
Okay, if we could, this is a public hearing. It was noticed for a public hearing. Chad is down in the council chambers, and at this time, I would request that Matt open this up for a public hearing and see if anyone has appeared.
Yeah, this time we'll open up a public hearing on the matter of the zoning change for the 4,000 block of Williams Crossing Way. Chad, is there anybody in attendance downstairs?
I do not have anyone attendance here.
And was there any written comment submitted for today's public hearing?
No, there hasn't.
Okay. Then at this point, then I'll close the public hearing on that particular issue and entertain a motion.
So moved.
Second.
Motion, Mr. Maples, second, Mr. White. Ms. Gill?
2020 OR 30, just so you know.
Yes, this is 2020 OR 30.
Councilperson White?
Aye.
Councilperson Burns?
Aye.
Council Vice President Maples?
Aye.
Councilperson Cross?
Aye.
Councilperson Webb?
Aye.
Council President Owen?
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins?
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis?
Aye.
8-0.
All right.
Thank you very much.
Then we'll move on.
Thank you.
We've got now a zoning change request for the property at 3519 Utica Sellersburg Road. Property is zoned C2 commercial and is requested to be zoned R1.
Yes, this is a rezoning application that comes to you again with a favorable recommendation from the Planning Commission. This property is located at 3519 Utica Sellersburg Road, and it's currently zoned at C2 medium to large scale commercial. When this area was annexed several years ago, for some reason it was brought in and zoned as commercial. The maps at the time, though, that when this was in the county, this property was residential. It's my understanding, Chad can correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that's the history of this. And the applicant, Mari Wilkerson, the property owner, is requesting that the property be zoned back to residential R1. And Chad can explain why the need for that. It just is, as a residential, it's actually a residential property there now, and they want to do some work to their house, and it's much easier for them to do that and get the approvals and the permits and so forth if it's zoned R1, because they're wanting to make improvements to a house, as opposed if it remained a commercial zoning. It's much more complicated and more expensive for them to go through that process. Is that correct?
That is correct. Chad? Yes, that is correct. They basically want to add a room onto the back of the house and add a garage onto the side of the house. And under the commercial zoning, which is the C2 zoning, which again is designed for something like a Target, a really large piece of commercial development, it makes it almost impossible for them to add on to the house. They could get a bunch of variances and waivers and things from the Board of Zoning Appeals, but it was almost much easier to just go back and rezone it R1. So we decided to go that direction instead.
And I don't know if someone is on this call.
I don't believe they are. I contacted them this morning, but I did not hear back from them.
Okay, and this would be a public hearing, Mr. President.
Okay, we'll go ahead and open a public hearing in the matter of the zoning change request for 3519 Utica Sellersburg Road from C2 to R1. Is there anybody in attendance downstairs?
There is nobody in attendance down here. Also, for the record, I did not receive any letters or correspondence in regard to this zoning change in our office.
Okay, then we'll go ahead and close the public hearing. Were there any questions from council members?
I didn't have a
Not, we'll have a
question,
motion.
but I would like to just ask the council to approve this. This is right down the street from myself and Councilman Webb. This is obviously a residential situation. If you're not totally familiar where this property is, I mean, it's right in the middle of homes and it always has been. So I just ask everybody to give the affirmative.
Yeah, we talked all through planning and zoning, Scott. It was all unanimous vote.
Is there a motion?
I make a motion, we approve. I don't have the ordinance number in front of me. So what, I make a motion to approve.
Second. And I'll
Okay,
second.
a motion by Mr. Webb and a second from Mr. Hawkins to approve 2020 OR 31.
Councilperson White?
Aye.
Councilperson Burns?
Aye.
Council Vice President Maples?
Aye.
Councilperson Croft?
Aye.
Councilperson Webb?
Aye.
Council President Owen?
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins?
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis?
Aye.
8-0.
Right. Final item on the agenda for this evening, Heather Metcalf, 2020 OR, this will be 32, additional appropriation. And this is going to be for the, well, several things. Several of the things that we've already done, we've put into this ordinance for the purpose of having a public hearing at our next council meeting. But then also we have the capital lease payment of $167,300, which would be the first installment for the body cameras in the police department. Heather, do you want to add anything?
That one is new. There's also, the second one is for an insurance reimbursement that we received. So this is reappropriating the cash that we received for insurance reimbursement.
And there's several on there that were just, you've actually already appropriated the money back when things were at the beginning of COVID.
Yes.
And we did not have a public hearing. Larry and I believe that you complied with state law, but we're going to do this to make the state board of accounts sleep better at night, because we know they worry about these type of things.
Yes, and I believe Chief Kavanaugh's on here too, if you have any questions about the body cameras.
Right. We had Assistant Chief McVoy come at our last council meeting, and we kind of talked through a little bit of the proposal very briefly. But I know that several council members had smaller breakout sessions at the police department and went over the body camera proposal. This is something that we've been working on for quite a while. And I sent out via email the contract that was signed by the Board of Works pending our funding approval. So if any council members have any questions.
The only thing I'd say, Matt, is I'll reach. Sorry.
Right.
One thing I would add is I did reach out to the FOP Lodge 100 president just to make sure there was no concern by the lodge or the union. They advised me there was no concern, and they may have some small concerns about some privacy issues, but they felt confident that that can be worked out with policy with the administration. So it was refreshing that they actually welcomed it too. So I just want to make that on the record that somebody did. That I did make contact with them, and they supported the decision.
Good deal. If there are no questions, we'll take a motion.
Motion to approve. Second.
Did we public hearing?
I had a motion from Mr. Croft. Is that for the first and second reading? Okay. Was there a second? I missed who said the second.
It was mine, Matt. Is this a public hearing?
Public hearing will be at the next
no,
meeting.
we'll have the public hearing at our next meeting, yeah. So we've got a motion to approve 2020 OR 32 by Mr. Croft on the first and second reading, and a second by Mr. Maples. Anything further? Okay, Ms. Gill?
Councilperson White?
Aye.
Councilperson Burns?
Aye.
Vice President Maples,
Aye.
Councilperson Croft,
Aye.
Councilperson Webb,
Aye.
Councilpresident Owen,
Aye.
Councilperson Hawkins,
Aye.
Councilperson Ellis,
Aye.
8-0.
All right, thank you very much. I did want to add just a special thanks to Councilmember Maples, who worked with the Finance Department to find that initial installment through one of our Cume Capital Improvement Funds that we hadn't touched it specifically for IT and upgrades for hardware such as this. So we'll move on. Attorney comments, Mr. Wilder.
Surprisingly, I have none.
Mr. Merkley.
I have nothing.
Okay. Any department heads? Chief Kavanaugh, I see you're still with us. Anything to add?
No, as a council, as a fiscal body, I'd like to thank you all as members, working with the administration and working with us from the police department administration, and also communicating with the FOP to note that we do have their full support. And it is very clear that you as a fiscal body recognize the commitment, and we are here all together and hand in partnership to support the citizens of Jeffersonville. I'd like to thank you all and commend you with the work you did on this project and moving forward. Thank you all.
Thank you. Chad, did you have anything else? Nope. Heather, anything to add?
No, I'm good, thank you.
All right, and we'll go on to council comments. Mr. White?
No comment.
Mr. Burns?
No comment.
Mr. Maples?
No comment.
Mr. Croft?
No comment.
Mr. Webb?
No comment.
Mr. Ellis?
No comment.
And Mr. Hawkins?
Just real quickly, I would like to thank Chief for putting those meetings together. I didn't know if we did that last time. That was very helpful in understanding the situation with their needs. Anytime you can break out like that and talk more one-on-one, it's much more productive. But sorry he had to do it 4 or 5 times, but I just want to give a shout out and tell him thanks. And that's it.
All right. Well, I don't have anything else. Is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
We are adjourned. Thank you all.
Good night.
Thank you.
Ladies as well.
Right.
John Henry sign.